Welcome to the Injury Law Pod, the podcast that explores and demystifies the complex world of personal injury law. Each week, Missouri personal injury attorney Eric Bartlett dives into the legal issues surrounding personal injury cases to help you understand your rights and options when seeking justice and compensation for personal injuries. Join Eric as he shares his experience and real-life case studies, interviews guests, and answers your questions about personal injury law. The information Eric shares will help level the playing field if you have a personal injury claim. So sit back, relax, and let's explore the world of personal injury law together.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Injury Law Pod. I am your host, Eric Bartlett, 27-year personal injury lawyer. And this is the podcast that covers all things personal injury law related. We have one mission, which is to try and give people information that can help them when dealing with insurance companies on injury claims. There is definitely a system in place. The insurance companies know the ins and the outs of the process, and people that have never had to make a claim like this in their life, well, as I always say, they're in the danger zone. They're dealing with insurance companies. They're dealing with multi-billion-dollar companies that know how to utilize everything in their means to deny compensation that should otherwise be fairly paid out. And again, an insurance company is a for-profit business, so they are not there to be somebody's friend. They are there simply to make money, and the way they do that is by getting premiums from people and then paying out as little as they have to. So, as always, I hope you find the information that we're putting out here useful. And today we're talking about motorcycle accidents. Motorcycle accidents present their own unique scenario, unlike just your standard car accident, something like that. Motorcycle accidents require a little more attention to detail, maybe, or at least different detail, due to some of the circumstances that come about. So I hope you find, again, this podcast helpful, and we're just going to jump right in and talk about motorcycles and motorcycle accidents. And obviously, I don't think there's any question that motorcycles have been increasing in popularity over the years. I've gone through statistics here, kind of preparing for this podcast. And from 2002 to 2020, it was basically a 100% increase in motorcycles on the road, motorcycle sales, motorcycle registrations. And so, also of interest, it had a bump from 2020 to 2021 of almost 10% of new registrations for motorcycles. I have a feeling that was probably the COVID effect, right? Everybody was buying RV campers, buying bicycles, probably buying motorcycles because they were wanting to get outside. They were wanting to get away. You know, we were in such a lockdown state, and everybody was looking for other ways to enjoy life in a really hard time. So motorcycles have been increasing, and also of interest is to some degree, I know here in Missouri, like, we repealed the helmet law. Now there's only 18 states that require motorcyclists to have helmets when they're riding. And so I think helmet laws have been trending backwards, certainly not forwards. So that's also of interest. And, you know, motorcycles, the popularity, again, obviously through the summer. Interestingly enough, right? What's the most dangerous month for motorcyclists? August. Yeah, everybody's out, right? It's summer and riding their motorcycles. And listen, no judgment here. Um, so I'm not a motorcyclist. I don't even think I could play one on TV. I've been an avid bicyclist for most of my life, especially my starting in my late teens and then all the way till today. I have ridden a bike on the streets. I've ridden in various parts of the country. I commuted from my office or to my office from home on a bicycle for years. I currently do a lot of mountain biking. I get it. I don't think there's any better way to see the country, go on a trip, or just be out, right? When you're just, there's nothing around you boxing you in. You're out there, you're feeling the elements. And yeah, no, I get it. But man, motorcycles are dangerous. And, unfortunately, of course, I've heard, right, like medical people call them donor cycles, right? Like people get hurt and get killed, and then there's organ donations. I know on our side of things, um, what we see in all the safety features and roadway design safety modifications and things that maybe have reduced injuries for car accidents. Motorcycle accidents have certainly filled that spot. At the end of the day, their motorcyclists are just not, they just don't have the protection, right? That a car is going to provide you. You're pretty much out there. And especially if you're not wearing a helmet, I mean, your head is exposed. And if you're doing 60 miles per hour, 65, 70, obviously we've got speed limits of 70 miles per hour, and there's an accident, oof, it can be catastrophic. And we certainly see it. Right now, we've uh, kind of just had a case that involved the death of a motorcyclist. He was going along a highway in a tractor trailer, big semi truck, was pulling from the shoulder and didn't see him and pulled out, and bam, the motorcycle hits the trailer and he instantly kills um, the deceased. And he left behind a wife and young children. And I mean, we've had every imaginable injury on motorcycles. I mean, we've seen lost limbs, lost, leg, arm injuries, multiple fractures, head injuries, just the whole run of it. So, if we're looking again, I was doing some research, and here's basically the summary of what you can kind of see with motorcycles and motorcycle accidents. And majority of them happen on urban roads as opposed to rural roads, which again probably makes a lot of sense, right? Because the more cars you have around, well, the more likely there's going to be an accident. Usually in good weather, and I think that's probably because motorcyclists probably aren't as likely to go out if it's raining, right, or bad weather. Um, about half of these accidents occur at night, so half during the day. Um, and we see them both ways. We see a lot of motorcycle accidents that happen during the day. And then the majority of the motorcycle fatalities have occurred. Again, I'm looking at stats through 2021, um, involving two vehicles or three vehicles. The single motorcycle vehicle accident is on the minority side. And also the majority, almost 2/3 of these accidents have no alcohol involvement on the part of the motorcyclist. So kind of interesting facts there. And this is, again, those are all statistics around fatality accidents involving motorcycles. So again, there's no escaping the fact that motorcycles are dangerous. They, again, according to the statistics, that although motorcycles only make up 3% of all registered vehicles and 0.6% of all vehicle miles traveled in the United States, motorcyclists accounted for 14% of all traffic fatalities, 17% of all occupant fatalities, and 3% of all occupant injuries in 2021. So again, there's not as many motorcycles by any means, but they do account for a lot of deaths and injuries. So moving on. Oh, and another interesting fact is 76% of motorcycle accidents are a collision from the front. And that is our experience as well. So, I mean, I feel so that's 76%. I mean, I feel like 9 out of 10 motorcycle accidents that we get involved in involve like somebody pulling out in front of the motorcyclist, whether they're sitting there at a stop sign. The at fault driver is at a stop sign. The motorcyclist is coming down the street and they don't see the motorcyclist. They pull out, bam, collision. And that's how it unfolds. And I just mentioned, the one where the truck driver starts pulling off from the shoulder. Clearly, we have to assume he didn't see the motorcyclist coming down the highway. And, so now obviously most motorcycles at this point, they have headlights on the front, obviously a very wise thing to have some kind of a light on the front. But again, this is what happens. That's why every May, there's the campaign to bring awareness to motorcycles, right? Keep an eye out, watch out for motorcyclists. Because again, that's what happens is people just don't see them and they pull out in front of them or whatever, and a collision unfolds. Okay, so when it comes to an actual motorcycle accident injury claim, here's some of the key things that need to be thought about as somebody moves through that process. So number one is just, okay, the accident has happened. I mean, what's most important? Well, you've got to make sure that all the evidence that might be needed is preserved. And so what does that look like? Well, so for one, obviously, are there witnesses to this? And witnesses and or video, whether there's video footage from a store that's nearby, some other video footage. Does the at-fault driver, did they have a dash cam? Now a lot of motorcyclists wear a helmet cam. So they have the little camera up here and they have that on while they're riding. And I think that's super smart because why? Well, again, as opposed to a lot of car accidents, when there's a motorcycle accident, a lot of times the motorcyclist is incapacitated. So the accident happens, they're seriously hurt. They may have head trauma. They may not remember anything. And so to put a claim together against the other driver, the evidence is going to have to be there to support that the other driver did something wrong. And, for one, if the motorcyclist doesn't remember anything, can't tell anybody what happened. I mean, I've had people call me, loved ones calling for somebody that was hurt in a motorcycle accident. They've called while the person's still in the hospital and the person is completely incapacitated. and they're reaching out. They're trying to get help because they know this is a serious injury. They know this is a life-changing event. And so, we go about the process of making sure we get on the evidence part of it to really lock down what happened and who all is at fault. And again, we want to know, I mean, were there witnesses? Are there people that we need to reach out to, find out what they saw? Is there going to be video from any source, anything like that? We want to make sure there's video, there's photos of all the vehicles involved. We also want to go to the scene, and we want to make sure that if for any reason, let's say the at fault driver says that their vision was obscured by something, we want to see that. We want to go, and we want to be there in a car at that stop sign, looking the same direction that the at fault driver should have been looking. And is there truly any obstruction there? And if there is, what is it? And is somebody responsible for creating some obstruction to the view? These are all things, again, when you have a very catastrophically injured person, we've got to look everywhere because this is life changing, and we want to make sure we're trying to get all the compensation by anyone who might be responsible. And so those are key points to what needs to happen at first. Also, talked about this on previous episodes, the electronic control module. We want to see that, do we need to get that from the other at fault driver's vehicle to find out, did they even stop before the collision? Because again, those electronic control modules, also commonly called the black box, that's going to record about 5 seconds before the collision. So when a collision happens, immediately the black box in our modern day cars records like the prior 5 seconds. So we're going to see, what their speed was. Were they increasing speed, decreasing speed? Had they braked? Had they not braked? You can tell, right? So did they even stop? How about this? Were they on their phone, right? Were they even looking? So again, we may want to be working to get the cell phone records of that at fault driver to find out, were they distracted? Were they really even looking as they claim to have been? These are all the things that go into that process of getting evidence locked down, because time is of the essence with most of that stuff. And if you go, or the further you go away from the accident, things can get lost. And so you got to move quickly. And, this is hard too, because a lot of times, again, when something this catastrophic happens, obviously, like, a lot of people aren't thinking immediately like, oh, I want to go after this person, that person, whatever. I mean, they're sitting there in the hospital with their loved one, you know, on a breathing machine, whatever. They're just worried about whether or not that person is going to make it. So they're not even thinking about it. And meanwhile, time is still going on. And, insurance companies are getting involved for at fault drivers because they've probably learned about the accident. They're going to do everything on their part to get all the information they need. Obviously, their goal is to try and spin it with as least liability as they have to on their insured. And so this is always kind of tough because people they don't want to talk about lawyers and legal claims and all that stuff when this really heavy life-changing event has occurred. And again, they have one focus, which is their loved one. But unfortunately, that's the reality of the situation. You just can't afford to wait because it could really affect things down the road. So those are all kinds of the things that you need to think about when an accident like this happens. And again, if it's less than catastrophic injury and, but it's still very serious, then obviously it makes it easier for you to be thinking about all of this, um, and working to make sure things are properly preserved. Because again, once they're gone, they're gone. And so then once you kind of identify all the players, we can say, right, all the people that are potentially responsible for causing this accident, then, also you got to start contacting insurance companies, and you've got to start the claims process with those. And now, again, this is where I always say, you're in the danger zone, because now you're making direct contact with insurance companies, and everything you say can and will be held against you in a court of law. So you got to proceed really cautiously. If you're the injured person and you're making that contact, you do not want to give them a recorded statement. You do not have to give them a recorded statement. They're going to want to take a recorded statement, but you don't have to do that. And the reason you don't want to do that is because, again, especially if you're seriously injured, if there's any question about how this happened, there's going to be a fight over responsibility, whatever that looks like, then there's a high likelihood there's going to be a lawsuit, which at that point they are allowed to sit down and with a court reporter. Obviously, you have your lawyer there, but they're going to ask you questions. Everything you say is going to be transcribed by that court reporter. They're making a record of it. Okay. Now, you've also probably told the police, again, if you're, not incapacitated, you've probably given the police your version of what happened. And so there's 2 times you've talked about what happened. If you give a recorded statement, that's a 3rd time. And what happens is, especially, if you're talking to insurance companies or whatever right after it happens, I mean, even when you're talking to the police and it just happened, there's a lot going on. And, if you've never been in an automobile accident, some kind of serious trauma like that, there's a state of shock that's unfolding. And so people are asking questions. You may not be thinking clearly, whatever. And you say one version. Later on, you realize that's not true. I mean, that was not the way it happened. And I was totally not recalling that correctly. But as we go down, right, if you're talking to the insurance company, it's a recorded statement. You're giving them a version. This differs from the version you gave to the police officers. And then later on down the road, if you're in a deposition and you're under oath for the lawsuit and you're talking and your version there changes, even they're going to use those inconsistencies against you to hurt your claim. So the less opportunities you put out there to have varying versions of what happened, the better. And what you need to remember is, you need some time to go by. You need to process everything, get your wits about you. And at that point, you can talk. And again, you can, have a lawyer with you and, settle yourself. And that's why it's just so important. You just do not want to give a recorded statement. And again, every insurance company is going to say, I want to get a recorded statement from you. And, they're going to act like that's standard protocol and you basically have to do it. And at the end of the day, you don't. You do not have to give them a recorded statement, especially if you've outlined what you said, what you told the police officer, something like that. Fine. Now, again, if you were incapacitated, let's say, and you weren't able to speak to police officers or anything like that, and it's been a while, and now the claim is getting set up and the insurance company wants to hear from you as to what happened because there is no record of you saying anything. Well, at that point, you can talk with the insurance company, not recorded. You can tell them your version of what happened. And again, it's best if you've got a lawyer and you've consulted with the lawyer and you've been asked all the questions, right, already, so that you have a good recall on what it is you remember, what it is you don't remember. because guessing can wreck a claim. You start guessing about your speed, the other car's speed, distances, time, how long it was between the time you saw that car and the time they pulled out, the time of the collision, things that you do not know because you didn't have a timer going and everything happens split second. I mean, those are all the things that can trip you up. So, and you got to be prepared to recognize what you do know and what you don't know and that you don't guess. That's important. So you get your claims set up with the insurance company, again, depending on the severity of the injuries, the magnitude of this on your life. If you're going to have past medical care, you're going to have future medical care. You've missed work. You're going to continue missing work again, right? Just depending on how big of a deal this is. There's a high likelihood it could end up in a lawsuit. And so a lawyer can recognize pretty quickly, depending on the severity of it, whether or not it's even worth trying to deal with the insurance company earlier on rather than just going ahead, filing a lawsuit, getting it in that process, because through that process, everything is fully explored. Experts are brought in, things are really hammered out. All the evidence is brought forward. And it's at that point that insurance companies can be in the best position to really take the claim serious because, we're facing a jury trial if we don't get it resolved. And, insurance companies, they fear juries and they fear lawyers that will take it all the way to a jury. And so that's sometimes just if it's a catastrophic type event, it has to be a lawsuit. It has to be a lawsuit. Otherwise, it's going nowhere or it's going somewhere cheap. And you don't want that. You don't want either one of those. So those are the things. You get that evidence together, you get your claims set up with all potentially responsible parties. And again, we have had situations where people think, oh, it's just that car's fault. That's it. There's nothing else. And then we get involved and we're like, well, hold on. They're saying that they had their vision obscured by these signs that were in this yard, this growth that had these bushes and things, right, that were overgrown. And it created a dangerous situation for people pulling up at the stop sign because they weren't able to see clearly when they made the decision to pull out. And they didn't have any other choice because you had to get so far out into the roadway that at that point it was go time, and it's been known to be a dangerous situation. And now all of a sudden there's potentially somebody else that's responsible. These are the types of things that an experienced accident lawyer just knows to look for, knows what's important. And so that kind of transitions me into, you know, why does somebody even consider getting a lawyer? I mean, I've already kind of indicated some of the important parts, right? There's a lot of potential to make mistakes all throughout this process. And again, I mean, as a personal injury lawyer, as a motorcycle accident injury lawyer, I mean, we do not like getting the call 4 months down the road, 6 months down the road. Somebody finally decides to call us. And, we start asking questions about, well, okay, so you're saying this is what happened, right? Are there witnesses? Well, not that I know of. Okay. Any video? Did you ever check to see, did you have video? Did the other driver have a dash? No, I mean, I don't have any idea. Okay. So you didn't search out for any witnesses. You don't think there's any video. Oh, the other driver saying that you were speeding. Okay. What about them? Did you ask for the black box data to see what their story is? The black box data? They don't even know. So it's important. It's important to be ahead of things. A lawyer, personal injury lawyer, knows what they're doing. They get on it. And I always try to differentiate, right? If you call the family lawyer that you had for your divorce, or that traffic ticket or whatever, and you're like, "Hey, I was hurt. It was a motorcycle accident." And they're like, "Oh yeah, I'll sign you up." Sure. And they sign you up, and then they kind of put your file over here because they're going to court on the traffic tickets or the divorces or whatever. And they're like, "Well, it'll all come together at some point when, you know, Susan's done treating, and I'll put it all together. I'll send it off to the insurance, and, we'll get a settlement." And then meanwhile, 6 months, a year down the road, nothing was done on the front side that should have been done. So, man, you want to make sure you got somebody that knows motorcycle accidents, knows the intricacies of those. Again, could have, if it's an issue, could have the motorcycle inspected by a motorcycle expert. Make sure everything was functioning on the motorcycle at the time. There's just so many little components, and then you go into just the process of dealing with the insurance company. Personal injury lawyers, we know the insurance games. We know how they work. We know how they think. We know what motivates them. Um, so just having us involved, I don't know how else to say it, but it truly benefits somebody to maximize a claim. And I know how we work, and I know how the majority of personal injury lawyers work. We work on when money hits the table, that's when we get paid. And we don't get paid until then. So we're working for free all throughout the process. And if for some reason it goes south and there's no money, you don't owe us anything. Now, what kind of cases do we get involved in? The ones that we know we're getting money, that we know it may take a fight. It may take a lot of resources, may take a lot of money on our part to put the claim together. There again, we pay for everything right up front. So if from the littlest thing, we need to buy the accident report for $11, to the biggest thing, we need to pay $5,000 to an accident reconstruction expert. We need to pay $5,000 to a medical expert that's going to talk about the lifelong problems that Susan's going to have, right, coming out of this. Whatever that is, we pay for all that stuff out of pocket as we go along, only reimburse it when a settlement happens. And if no settlement happens, nobody owes us a thing. So to me, it lies in the realm of no brainer. If you've got serious injuries, you got life-changing injuries, you get a lawyer, because they are going to maximize the claim. And not just any lawyer, a motorcycle injury lawyer. You want to make sure these lawyers that you're dealing with, they've handled motorcycle accidents. They understand the arguments that come from insurance companies when motorcycles are involved, the prejudices, right? A lot of people, they hear a motorcycle injury and they start immediately thinking about the guy that's doing wheelies down the highway. They're like, those dumb butts, they're always doing stupid stuff. And guess what? Yep, got hurt. Well, here's what we know is not every motorcycle rider is doing stupid stuff. And many of the motorcyclists, they have bikes that wouldn't do stupid stuff, right? Nice sport touring bikes. And I mean, I had a jury one time, and, I was sensing, right, that. And in picking the jury, I just asked, I said, "Hey, here's the deal. My client over here, he rides his motorcycle to and from work and enjoys it sometimes on the weekends. And he's not hot rodding around. But let me ask you this, how many of you sitting here are basically think if you're a motorcycle rider, you get what you deserve for being out there on a motorcycle?" And I was able to weed out a lot of people that kind of had that built-in prejudice. And again, you got to know that. I mean, as a lawyer, you got to know what you're up against, because if you're in a jury trial and you don't weed those folks out, well, you're really swimming upstream in trying to get this person compensated for something that wasn't their fault, just because people have an underlying prejudice. And at the end of the day, you want people on a jury that don't have any preformed opinions that could affect their judgment, right? The law requires people sitting on a jury, they only are going to base their verdict on the evidence in the case. And again, everybody's got opinions, and that's fine, but you can't have any opinions so strongly that are going to affect your judgment in that case. That's the key. So I hope you've enjoyed and found informative this overview of motorcycle accident injuries. Again, they're kind of a special area of the personal injury world. They do involve certain things that just your standard car accident doesn't. And so it's really important, if you're seriously hurt, make sure, again, self-serving statement, but I just can't say it enough. Get in contact with a lawyer. It's a huge mistake not to. And I hope, again, you found this useful. If you did, I always ask, please leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening. Share this podcast with others that you may know that could use it. And until next time, I am Eric Bartlett. Stay well, stay safe.